Welcome to episode 244 of Real Therapy, where we talk about how movies make us feel. I'm Donavon Thompson with my co-host,
Daniel Wingfield.
and today we are joined by filmmaker Jason Miller to discuss season 2 of The Last of Us. We once again talk about the show's faithfulness to its game counterpart and also discuss the online discourse surrounding its cast and narrative decisions. This is Real Therapy, and you know what that means.
They're gonna talk about how it makes them feel. They're gonna watch all the movie reels, cause it's Dan and Don in Real Therapy. It's real.
Hey Alex, how you doing, man?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Doing well.
We're doing very well, very well. You know, one thing Daniel and I have been talking about for a couple of years now is just Star Wars in general. And Andor's been hot on our plate. And for a long time, I knew you were a big Star Wars fan. We met, a few years back, and we talked a little Star Wars then. And I was like, man, if I could ever get Alex on for Andor, then this would be awesome because, filmmaker, love Star Wars, and this is actually good Star Wars to talk about.
Yeah.
And so I can't be more thrilled that you're on, and we all really appreciate it for sure.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so just everyone out there, if you're listening, if you can give us a like and a review for our podcast, it really helps us out a lot. And of course, if you want to subscribe to the YouTube channel, that also is very, very helpful. Let's kind of just go ahead and dive into it, guys. One thing I want to kind of do is kind of go around the table here and get general thoughts on. We could talk about season 1 and Rogue One, season 2 also, but really hammer on season 2 here is like what did it do for you? Was it, obviously we're kind of I've already tipped everyone off. We really liked it. But what was it? What was working for you? What maybe wasn't? And what's your overall general thoughts on season 2 of Andor? Alex, you can start us off.
Okay, so lot to dive into here. I rewatched season 1 before watching season 2, or before season 2 started airing, and season 1, I mean, I already loved, and I thought it was even better on a second watch. I picked up way more the second time, and I actually watched Rogue One again after rewatching season 1, and I thought season 1 already made Rogue One a better movie. For me, some of the stuff that didn't work in Rogue One for me on initial watch was just made better by season 1. And then season 2, the first 3 episodes dropped, and I'm not gonna lie, guys, I was a little worried at first. The first 3 episodes were good. They were like obviously, stellar, but I didn't feel like it was quite on par with season 1. And then the next arcs dropped, and it was just bangers, all of them. Like, I just thought every single episode was fantastic. And I've gone back and rewatched the first 3 episodes, and I think the rest of the season makes those episodes better. But I think it was just like the expectations were so high, and I knew that we were only getting one. This was the last season, and that they were expanding basically or contracting 5 seasons worth of content into these 12 episodes. So I was just like, oh, there's no time to waste. But I still really like the first 3 episodes and the season as a whole. Like, once we got to Gorman and all that stuff was happening, I mean, the Gorman arc was incredible. And yeah, I just thought it was, I mean, we can, I'm curious to hear what you guys think, but like, there's so much to talk about. And even that little inkling of the Force in the final episodes, where I thought that was just handled so perfectly and had that magic that the Force had in the original 3 movies. But yeah, that's kind of my overview.
Daniel, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I know we've touched on this season in an earlier episode, at least half of the episodes in the season. And I think I still stand by my original opinion, and that this is the best Star Wars has ever been for me. Just in terms of production quality, writing, acting, it's all clicking and gelling exactly like the creators wanted it to. And I just think it's better than I thought Star Wars could be in some ways. Like it exceeded my expectations. And I think the double-edged sword of that is that now, in some ways, I agree, Jason, or Alex, sorry. I'm gonna call you Jason. We had Jason Miller on last week, and I'm just getting names mixed up all day today. It's just my curse. So the double-edged sword of it being that, yes, it makes Rogue One better. I agree, especially that first 30 minutes or so. It really smooths out some of the rough edges, I think, that they had kind of getting the momentum started. But then it also makes everything else we've gotten look worse.
Yeah.
And look like even like it makes it even more baffling when you look at like the Obi-Wan Kenobi show or these other shows that had the potential, the puzzle pieces to be, you know, another piece of content that's the best ever Star Wars has ever been, but was just fumbled so haphazardly that it was what we got. And so, yeah, it's this thing of like, I think I've told Donavon, it's like, this is the best Star Wars has ever been, and I'm afraid it's the best Star Wars will ever be. That's the fear is, and I want to dig into, especially there's been some really interesting comments after the season from Tony Gilroy talking about the kind of studio pressures and things that they were told during season 2 about how the budget was too high, about streaming is dead, all these things. And so, it almost feels like, in some ways, like we were lucky to even get season 2.
Yeah.
With everything that was going on. And so I think that's where I'm at. I'm like, this is the best it's ever been. And part of my heart is breaking because I'm worried it's the best it'll ever be. So that's big picture. I'm excited to dig into it. What about you, Donavon?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think my sentiments line up almost exactly with Alex's. The first 3 episodes, I was a smidge worried. And really that first episode, and then maybe halfway through episode 2, I was kind of like, whenever they kind of tell us, hey, this is the last season, or, they give us the roadmap, you kind of know how much real estate you have, in terms of structure and episodes. And there's been so many TV shows in the past where, you're looking at the watch and you're like, how are they going to do this in 20 minutes? Or there are only 2 episodes left in Game of Thrones. How are they going to do that? Like, how are they going to make me feel good about that, or whatever it is, And so I was kind of feeling that push and pull in those first 3 episodes. But by the time I think that last, I call them pods, that last pod ended, and we started getting into more of the Gorman stuff. And I mean, from there it was just all bangers, like Alex said. And I immediately turned on Rogue One after the finale of season 2. And, one of the you guys both kind of mentioned this, one of the big criticisms when Rogue One first came out back, 2012, 13, 16, was that? Okay, it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's still long ago, but not as long as I was thinking. Whenever, that come out, people were talking about how it felt disjointed in the beginning and kind of was just like this kind of, hodgepodge of scenes and whatever, but it feels now like a finale, like an actual series finale of Andor. And it feels kind of more episodic, like the first half, like a television show. And it kind of gets into the big finale, when they're still in the plans. So anyway, I had a great time with it, and I agree, Daniel. It makes me worried about potential Star Wars, and also I think they should give Tony Gilroy a blank check, whether it's 600 billion or not. They should be like, hey, what would you like to do in this universe? Going forward.
Yeah,
I think that'd be great. And one thing I do want to ask, it's just 'cause I don't know, Alex. I need real quick a thumbs up or a thumbs down on like a list of Star Wars projects. So get your thumb ready. I need to know real quick. Force Awakens. Okay. Last Jedi. Okay. Rise of Skywalker.
as low as it can possibly.
Below the frame of the podcast for those who are not on the YouTube channel. The Rogue
So you're a
One.
man of culture, is what you're
You're a
saying.
man of culture. Yeah.
Yeah.
Rogue One, yeah.
Okay. Well, Solo.
I didn't hate it.
Yeah, I don't hate it.
Yeah.
I don't hate it. I don't
Yeah.
hate it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Oh my God, just below Skywalker. Just
Okay,
not
good.
even the frame.
Good. What about
Thank you.
Skeleton Crew? Me and Daniel were kind of
I liked it.
split on this one. Okay.
I liked Skeleton. I mean, we don't have to this is
Yeah.
this is a fast round. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. No, you're good. We could do a podcast on every single one of these just to figure out your perspective on it. Because again, we've been in a bubble on Star Wars, him and I, for like 5 years now. And so also Mandalorian, we'll do season 1, 2, 3. Season 1, season 2, season 3. Yeah, you got it, man. Okay, what about
Correct.
Book
You're
of-
answering
correct.
correctly, by the way.
So
Yeah,
far, you're pretty much 1-1. What about Book of Boba Fett? What are we feeling about that one?
Book of Boba Fett is 2 shows for me. It's the 2 episodes of The Mandalorian,
yeah. Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
fantastic, and the rest of it's kind of mid. I
Yeah.
thought.
Yep. That's pretty accurate. And then the biggest hit of all, The Acolyte. How do you feel about that one?
It didn't work for me.
Yeah.
I
It
mean, there were some
doesn't.
cool fight scenes. There were some great.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
moments
Some cool
and-
Jedi moments. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but fight scenes don't work if you don't have good character development or good dialogue or
No, and I think like
good anything.
I mean that's kind of where like I think Andor first of all, like I think it's good to kind of clear the air and say that like, there's a lot of like criticism online where if Star Wars is woke, people don't like it. But I think that like Andor is about the most woke that you can
Yeah.
get in Star Wars,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's by far my favorite thing. So it's not about character representation or anything like that. It's just about quality,
Yes.
taste, and writing.
It's
Like
about
it's
good
so
storytelling,
yeah,
and I
Yeah.
think one thing I saw about Tony Gilroy, just as like kind of trivia about him that makes so much sense, is that he's a huge history buff. He
yes,
loves history. And I think
yes.
that is so
So is
obvious.
George Lucas. Yeah,
Yes, and I think the Gorman arc, it is so obvious because
Yeah.
there's so much of that that feels like, oh wow, they just ripped this straight from like the KGB playbook, from like Soviet era or today things that are happening,
yeah. I
right?
mean, even like French Revolution, like it's
Yes,
not an accident that it's like a kind of a French planet,
right.
Yeah,
Yes, yeah,
For
and
sure.
so I think you see that realness bleed through, and I think that's one of the most interesting things about this is it does feel like, as far as Star Wars content, these characters feel more like real people than I think almost any other version of Star Wars characters we've ever gotten. In terms of just,
yeah,
it feels like we're meeting different versions of us in this universe, like just normal people, normal problems, no special powers, no special purpose to be the most famous, glorious person, and I think, yeah, I think that's part of what makes it so special is just that it feels so like it's Star Wars for grown-ups, right? It's like we grew up as kids imagining ourselves in these Star Wars worlds, and the fantastical, Hollywood versions that we were given with, flying lightsaber battles and awesome Force stuff and Yoda flipping around with his lightsaber. Like that's the version of Star Wars we wanted to live in as kids because that's exciting as kids. And then it's like growing up, it's like, oh no, this is the version of Star Wars I can imagine myself living in as an adult because it feels more real, it feels more realistic, and it's still cool and it's still like badass, and I still want to be a rebel spy going on awesome missions with Andor, and I want to, go on coffee dates with Luthen and hear him just ramble about how everything's shit. Like, it's like, it's
I
just,
don't want to go on coffee dates with Luthen because that's actually not a coffee date. That is an act of, yeah. So anyway,
espionage, right? Yeah.
yeah,
Anyway,
espionage, yeah.
I think that to me is just such a key point of this is that it's written like we're adults. It's written like we can put things together. We don't have to have it spelled out. We can infer. And I think that just elevates it above. Again, that's just one of the things that I'm like, this is the best dialogue writing, character writing that we've ever gotten. Just period.
100%. And I think that like I still think that you could have Star Wars for kids be more elevated. Like, people, one of the argument that I always hear is that like it's for kids, on anything, not just
Mm,
Star Wars. It's for kids. It doesn't need to be whatever. And I'm like, well, look at early Pixar. Like that's for kids,
mhm,
and the
mhm.
writing is absolutely top tier. So it's for kids is not an excuse for bad writing. And I think you can have both Andor and the, Jedi adventures that kids like more and still have both of them like aesthetically look the same. Because I think what Andor did so
Yes.
well is it was like the perfect modernization of the original trilogy. Like
Mm,
it's what the prequel should have looked like.
mhm.
It keeps that 70s aesthetic while making it more modernized, keeping the grain a little bit, but the cinematography is elevated, the visual effects are elevated. I mean, they even went so far as to give people like 70s and 80s haircuts, which I thought
Yeah,
worked really
They do
well.
work.
it did.
It just kind of keeps it in that world. And so I think like the challenge for Disney or like the call to action for Disney is like take what worked about Andor. It doesn't mean that it has to be like bloody and gory and like super serious,
Yeah.
but there's no reason all your shows shouldn't be this quality.
Yeah, I mean, I think that introduces, kind of the conundrum I think Disney finds themselves in, especially, considering all of these articles. So if our listeners are not aware, there's one specifically that came out that basically they came to Tony in the middle of building sets for season 2, and they were like, "We can't afford this," and he was like, "All right, I won't do it then." Like he was just kind of like, if you can't afford it, we'll just leave it at season 1. That's fine with us. Like it was, and I'm sure as a creator, partly he was bluffing. Like you always want to keep making your art. I don't think any of us as artists are like, yeah, I don't want to be an artist on this project anymore. But it was just that kind of total commitment to telling the story right
Yeah.
that Tony brought and did not budge on, right?
Yeah.
That's the part that worries me when going forward is, are they going to give creators that much power? Or are they going to find creatives that are willing to fight that hard for their work and their perspective? Especially when it feels like, Disney as a company. I shared this with Donavon a few weeks ago. I'm starting to, and I know this has been a thing on the internet or whatever, but it is starting to become more real to me that every time Disney buys something I like, it kind of goes down in quality some. Like it becomes more profitable, it becomes more widespread, more marketable, more, all these things, but it kind of the substance quality of what I'm getting is kind of gradually going down. And so it Andor to me feels like this anomaly.
Yeah.
Where it's like all of these perfect factors had to go right. I mean, even the fact that Disney swapped CEOs in the middle seems to have had an impact on his power in the situation of like, he was already here when they were swapping. And so there was just there, and so it's just, it worries me as a fan, as someone that wants more Star Wars in this vein of like, are we going to get, the budgets to do the sets right, to do, the all of these things, if all of that was like it was, but the writing sucked, it wouldn't matter. You know what I'm saying? And so it's this, I guess it's this question of like, are we going to get this situation to happen again? Are we going to get someone that's as good as Tony Gilroy in a position of power at Disney that can say no to the CEOs when they tell him it's too expensive? Or willing to, I mean, even as a career, like, Tony Gilroy is already successful. If this is a young writer, they're not going to be like, all right, I won't do it, because that means like their career could be over. Tony Gilroy's fine. He's set. He'll work forever. He doesn't. But like, so it's just all of these factors that make me worried of like, can we get Star Wars like this again? Will Disney learn the right lessons from this? I'm curious what y'all think about that.
Alex, you go.
I've talked a lot. Do you want to go?
Oh, well, I mean, I was going to say there's a couple of things there real quick that one, there's been a lot of, reports lately about, after Iger took over, there's this kind of mandate more for quality. Not saying that's been happening, but point is, I think it was Bob Chapek, they're not dumping money as much as they were into the streaming now. There's been like, it's even this quote running around the last couple of weeks, like streaming is dead. That's not true, but I think what they mean is we're not going to spend $600 billion on two seasons of television. And I think one of the big things here, and this is kind of goes back to what we were talking on every Star Wars podcast we've done, or anything about Marvel or DC or whatever, is that, is it a great that the visual effects and the locations and all these kind of things are top tier? 100%. But the Acolyte, even if it looked pretty, it looked very pretty, well polished. There were maybe a few missteps in there, but for television, it looks really good. You could have decreased all that by 20-25% in terms of quality, costumes, locations, whatever. But if it had good writing, it would be okay. If it had good, someone who actually was, not saying they didn't know what they were doing, but someone who understood the material and, at the same time understood character and dialogue. I think Disney's big problem is they've been hiring people that just don't understand Star Wars or understand Marvel or whatever.
And it does feel like those projects have too many cooks in the kitchen, right? Like
Yeah.
to me, it's like sometimes it's the writing. Like I don't know if this is the writer's fault or the amount of notes they got in writing this that were mandatory.
Yeah,
That-
I
know what
don't
I mean?
think.
And so it
I don't
almost
think-
some of those feel overproduced, and that is even again where Andor feels different. Where Tony's like, no, I'm doing my thing. You guys get out of here. I don't have to listen to you. And like a young and up and coming showrunner is not going to have the confidence or even just kind of the internal political power to make those choices. And so I agree with you.
Well,
it is
but it comes down to the Kathleen Kennedys of the world to understand when they see talent, like how it's supposed to be, where it's like, hey, we're hiring this person because we believe their vision. Of course, that's not saying everyone you just give them a blank check and let an amateur writer go, but there are guardrails. But that's where, we've seen it time and time again. Look at even DC, DC before James Gunn took over, where it's like people are, things are being announced before they're ever come out, or there's reshoots. Even Marvel does reshoots, whatever, and they're trying to fix it in the edit, or fix it in post, or fix it here, and or Brave New World was basically shot twice, and just come out in February, and we kind of saw the results of that box office wise and critically. And I think even like, is it Lena Headey, the showrunner for the Acolyte? I think it's her name. I don't think these people are going into Star Wars thinking I'm going to make a bad show. I don't think they're going in there thinking I'm going to destroy Star Wars, or I'm going to do something to make you mad because this, you don't know what Star Wars or whatever. These people are hired because they want to make a good show. They think they're doing the right thing, but I think that she was picked wrong. I think that her version of Star Wars is not what people have come to expect. And also just, again, it comes down to the storytelling and the dialogue and those sort of things. Um, I think it will happen again, Daniel. I think we will get another Andor at some point in the time frame of Earth.
Our
I'm not
lives.
sure.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I
Not
didn't
even
say
our
our
lives.
lives.
Maybe after we're dead, we'll get another good a show
Yeah, I
as
didn't
good
say
as
our
that.
lives,
There's
but
one thing on the slate that has potential, and it is Beau Willimon, who wrote the prison arc of season one, and he wrote the Gorman arc of season two. He is writing James Mangold's Dawn of the
Mhm.
Jedi movie.
I didn't know
Yeah,
that. Okay.
James Mangold is hit or
yeah,
miss.
yeah,
And
He
mostly
is.
hit for me. Mostly
yeah.
hit for me. But like Indiana Jones was bad. Um, Now, so if Mangold can make a Mangold movie,
Hmm.
and if Beau Willimon writes a badass script, that movie currently on the slate has potential.
Yeah,
And that's kind of the only thing that I see coming up in in the foreseeable future that has any chance of being Andor levels of good, if not even quite there, but t
yeah,
pushing towards
yeah,
there.
I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think the Dawn of Jedi is going to happen because I think he got into the system with like an original IP. I mean, he's done obviously Logan and Wolverine, those kind of things, but he got in with Indiana Jones, and Star Wars has way more rules than Indiana Jones does. And he was trying to emulate a little bit of Spielberg, just not very successfully. It didn't feel like a James Mangold movie to me.
Right.
yeah,
And I think it bit him in the ass. And I don't know. I don't think it's going to happen. I hope it does happen. I hope we get a Swamp Thing movie from DC Studios, but
Yeah.
I
mm,
don't see it happening. And I love Mangold. I love The Complete Unknown.
Oh,
Obviously,
so good.
Walk the Line, Ford versus Ferrari,
Yeah.
Logan.
Logan. I'm a the Wolverine apologist. I like that movie.
Hmm.
But Indiana Jones. And I'm a huge Daniel knows this, and Daniel knows too, but I'm a huge Indiana Jones fan, and there's things I like about it, but it just wasn't
Yeah.
what I wanted from the movie. So
Well, it's like when you have writers like Stephen Knight and Damon Lindelof and all these people like trying to write the next, episode 10, basically the Ray movie or whatever that is. And you have these great talents that are leaving the project and we don't know why. We don't know if it's where the frustrations or the creative differences are coming from, but we just know that there's creative differences. And it's like, yeah, from what I've heard, uh, there's essentially like a text thread in town that's like, from all the top creatives, like avoid Star Wars at all costs. And it's like to have the brand diluted from in 2015,
Yeah,
this is the thing to do. And you're getting all these like great talents on board. Like, however you feel about The Last Jedi, like Ryan Johnson made a Ryan Johnson movie.
hmm,
he
And that
tried. He really tried.
and that was like, you want people like Ryan
yeah,
Johnson to be able to come in and write and direct Star Wars. Maybe not with the legacy characters, maybe just give him his own new set of
yeah,
characters, which, I was kind of excited for his trilogy that was gonna just go beyond whatever. But it's like, yeah, there's so much. I mean, it seems like there's some low-hanging fruit that they could easily get people excited about, like a Knights of the Old Republic kind of
yeah,
setting,
yeah,
big Jedi versus Sith battles. I like it's certainly the era that the Acolyte explores, like that pre-Phantom Menace era. Again, like
yeah,
if done like Andor, could be a really cool era to play in.
yeah.
For
Uh,
sure. I
I
still
think,
think the best path that they really need to do is just go beyond like
yeah,
500. They go 500 years past Ray. and
Yeah.
just start over. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, I love
Yeah.
Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader and Yoda and all these people. And I love Grogu. But
Yeah.
like, we need to be in an era where we can have the aesthetic of Star Wars,
Yeah.
the Force, those kind of things, but with a new cast of characters where there's no strings attached. It's like
Yeah.
even The Mandalorian. I love those first two seasons, but we're dancing around like the timeline. It's like, well, because you just automatically as a fan, why isn't Luke here or why, whatever,
Well,
and
yeah, and then
so
there's like the big like, well, where's Grogu in the sequel trilogy?
Right. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Well, and I think
exactly.
that illustrates, everything from Andor to that Mangold film. That I agree. I think that's probably one of the most promising ones. Maybe Ryan, is it Ryan Gosling that's the Starfighter one that just got renounced?
Yeah.
There's
It's
a
Sean
version
Letty's
of that where we
directing,
could
yeah.
get a good like, Top Gun,
That's gonna be
Star
a
Wars
popcorn. That's
kind of
gonna be a
thing.
popcorn
Yeah,
movie,
yeah,
which is
and
nothing wrong with that,
exactly
but
that could work.
I am curious. I'm
But
curious on that one.
the underlying issue for Andor or even that Mangold film is that we're telling stories in the past and we already know what the future amounts to. And I think for, like us, a lot of it's disappointing. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, yeah, this is cool, but it all leads up to fucking Last Jedi or Rise of Skywalker. And so I know how
Well,
this turns out and it's unsatisfying. So there's just kind of this underlying, like, there's not as much mystery. There's not as much intrigue involved with these shows because I know what ends up happening, and that's kind of disappointing. And so, like, I agree. It's like we need a clean slate, and I would love them to jump 500 years in the future and give Ryan Johnson a clean slate. I think he could do a really good job. To me, the critical flaw of The Last Jedi is that he went a little too out there with some of his creative choices, and it just needed to be reined in to honor some of the legacy that was set up. It just kind of it was too disjointed from what The Force Awakens started, and it needed a bit more of oversight to make them connect more thematically, and that wasn't there. And I think that's that. And then you get Rise of Skywalker, which is just this hodgepodge trying to bring all the ties and bring them together. So that's where I'm at. It's just like I love this, but I already know how it all ends up. And so it's a little
right.
bit less satisfying or just a little less exciting, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I think I hope at least Disney and the creatives know that they just absolutely screwed the pooch with the sequel trilogy because it's like when you have a writer like Michael Arndt starting the script for Episode 7, and it's basically just a mandated release date that kicks him off the project, and goes to JJ and Kasdan writing Force Awakens. Like Force Awakens was fun and it's a good movie, but it doesn't set up the stakes or the world or
Yeah.
the like unfortunately they were so afraid of the prequels and the use of the
Yeah.
politics in the prequels that they just completely ignored it, and you kind of need to know how the empire comes back. Like you need to
Yes.
understand how the first order comes into existence, and that's what, like, if you go 500 years in the future, if there is another uh dictatorship or whatever kind
Yeah.
of regime. Like I mean, we're seeing it happen in America now. Like obviously these things can happen and do happen, but you have to know the why
Yeah.
as the audience to care.
My
You
my
know,
big my big my plea. I don't know. Did you ever read any of the like extended universe stuff, like any of the books and stuff, like
Yeah, like
before Disney?
Thrawn. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Is that what were you saying?
The Thrawn.
Yes. Yeah. 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 And then
Yeah, yeah.
there's a series beyond that that's really interesting. It's like when in those books, like Hannah and Leia had twins, and one of them becomes a Dark Lord, and all. It's really
Yeah,
fun.
yeah,
It's really good
yeah.
stuff. But eventually, that comes upon like there's this like outside invading force that's from outside the galaxy. That's called like the Yuzhan Vong, and they're impervious to the force. They're like living, like all their ships are like plants that they grew, and there's just this very alien to what we've seen of Star Wars thing. And like to me, it's like we should do that. We need something else. We don't. We need it. We can still keep. We want politics. I think those of us that grew up on the prequels enjoy the political side of Star Wars. We enjoy seeing the inner workings of why this universe is functioning the way it is. But I think we do. I don't think we need another empire. I don't think we need another rebellion. And I think for all the pros of Force Awakens, and I do think that movie works really well, the back half, and when it's just revealed it's the Death Star but bigger, it does feel uninspired, and it feels just a bit like, oh, okay. And I think as a viewer, you're already on the train at that point, that you don't notice it as much maybe on the first watch because you're just on the ride, and I think the pacing is good in that movie. It flows well. But yeah, I think, I do feel like we need to do something very different if we want Star Wars to have a chance to kind of start over a little bit or refresh everything. You know what I mean? Um, yeah. I'm hopeful, but I just don't know if Disney's going to see it that way. Because that also, to me, that's like risk, right? Well, we're going to do something new. We're not going to bring legacy like that. That I'm sure to their the bean counters that's riskier than doing something that involves Luke Skywalker or Han Solo or Rey or Finn or these other characters that have already at least may not be the most popular, but they do make money. They do have an audience.
I
Yeah,
do I do kind of want to bring us back to Andor a little bit
yeah,
and
sure.
kind of
Okay,
start talking about this second. No, I mean I love it. It's great. This second half of the season here, particularly starting with the Gorman stuff. One thing about, I've always said whenever prequels announced, I'm always like, ah, like because we already know where it's going. And you have to be really, really good. Like you have to really tell me something I didn't know or something that really enhances the further storytelling down the line to kind of justify your existence, right? And Andor season two, I think it kind of goes back to our it makes other things look bad, but also it really gives a lot of great context into going into the original trilogy, right? I mean, and just showing how the Empire are taking something as insignificant in terms of just it could be a throwaway line in the extended canon of like, oh, there's Gorman and there's like an insurrection or whatever it is, and but we've seen the machinations of it on the ground and like actually what the Empire is doing, and they're needing this crystal, or I think it's what they were doing, right? If I remember correctly, they're needing some type of
It's the Kyber crystal for the Death Star. Yeah,
is it the Kyber
It's
crystal?
the same as the lightsaber technology. Yeah.
Okay. 'Cause I know there's also the Kyber on Jeddah, which is also in Rogue One. But so
Or yeah, maybe I'm
essentially,
wrong. Maybe I'm mixing up Jeddah, and now
yeah,
you're making me doubt it.
Alex, Alex, what's on the Gorman? I can't remember. The spiders are protecting it, whatever it is. I know
uh,
that.
yeah, I can't
It
remember
doesn't
exactly
matter.
either. I think
Yeah,
it's some energy source. It
yeah,
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 was
it's
whether it was
something like
Kyber
that.
or not. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, the point being is that we're getting to see how the Empire is essentially playing. It's not a super complex idea, but it's playing 3 or 4D chess, and they're playing the long game over a couple of years.
yeah.
And so I think one of the great things about that again is showing um, all the things that went into leading up to this boy on a farm, destroying the Death Star, and like how many more players there were. Like I think Luthen is probably the second or greatest Star Wars character ever created now, like from a
Yeah,
TV show. Just from his monologue from season one is like probably the best written, as Daniel says all the time, the
Oh,
best written Star Wars thing
it's
ever, probably.
Shakespearean
Yeah.
monologue.
and that's Bo Willimon, guys. I'm just
Yeah,
saying.
It's
yeah.
oh, it's so
It's
good, and
Yeah,
and so the thing, and then on the flip side of this, it's like what
yeah.
you're talking about, how these prequels or whatever can make other things look bad. Between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens, there's 30, 40 years there of like, oh, so all these people like Andor and Luthen did all this stuff, and Mon Mothma and all these people, and you guys let it happen again. Like
Yeah.
you let it happen
yeah,
again
sure,
in the
yeah,
exact same way, and like no one learned anything during like, and that's the downside of this is you're seeing so much richness leading into A New Hope, and then you're like, oh, well, it makes everything else look really bad. But let's talk about Gorman. What are you guys'
Yeah.
thoughts on this? I thought like that kind of felt like the finale to me, really, and like the last three
climax.
episodes was more of
Yeah,
like an
yeah,
epilogue, kind of leading in the Rogue One, which is like another finale. But to me, the Gorman stuff, particularly that last episode when things really start hitting the fan, the stormtrooper shoots one of his own, and it's just like it's amazing. It's like, okay, this is real storytelling. Alex, tell me about Gorman and what you thought about it.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, like I thought it could have easily been the climax of the series, and you could have gone into Rogue One after that. I love what they did still with the next 3 episodes, but I thought it was great, and I think it, like you said, it makes the Empire that much scarier. Like, and you're not
yes,
even dealing with like the top of the top. You're not dealing with Palpatine. You're not even dealing
no,
with Krennic for a lot of it. It's these underlings and the ranking and like just the fear keeping everyone in line. And what I think, Andor does so brilliantly, to your point, Daniel, is like if you have a prequel, like yes, it takes some of the stakes away, it takes some of the air out of it because you sort of know what happens. But what, like you guys mentioned, they introduce so many new fantastic characters that like you're always playing this game of like, okay, who's gonna die? How are they gonna die? Are they going to die? And I think Andor like really towed the line nicely of keeping some characters alive and keeping some mystery out there, but then killing off the characters that mattered in really interesting and unique ways. And that was, one of the things that made the last arc so great was just
Mm.
that like attempted or like the basically the heist movie, getting in there to kill Luthen and just
Yeah.
how tragic that was. That it was like they were trying to keep him alive to Rat and like she had to go in there and take him
Yeah.
out. But yeah, I mean, Gorman was, I just think, peak Star Wars. I loved the design. It felt fresh. It felt new.
Hmm.
Again, that idea of like a French planet sounds kind of funny on paper, but
Yeah.
it totally works in execution.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think Gorman, Gorman is the peak of Andor, and Andor is the peak of Star Wars. So, like, it's like Gorman is the top for me. And I think a big thing for me that it did is that it really graduated the Empire from mustache twirling villains
Yes.
that want to rule the galaxy to showing how fascist dictatorship systems destroy not only the things they're doing, but the people inside the system. I think that was one of the most brilliant parts of this show is that, season one introduced us to Deidre, and I'm blanking on her boyfriend's name at the moment, but to, just in the system, no, they're not actively murdering people. They're not, spearheading genocide. They're just doing a job and they're working their way up through the corporate empire system. And in that, they get roped into being, kind of the instigators or like the boots on the ground for one of the most horrific genocidal massacres that ever exist in the universe. And they didn't even really plan to be there. They just got there, and then they're already stuck inside the system. And then that system chews them up and spits them out too. They don't reap any rewards from being a part of this, horrible thing. They are blame is shifted on them. They're killed. You know what I mean? And so like I think and I think you look at history. That's true of all these systems. You look at the dictatorships that are well known, like the Hitlers and the Stalins. Like a big reason that those systems end up falling is because it's so the selfishness of do anything to get one over the other person to succeed yourself over the system. That's so built into the ideology of these people that eventually just eats itself from the inside out. Right, like that is usually. I mean, that's what happened with Russia. That's a lot, especially towards the end of World War II. That's what happening within Hitler's regime, and so like I think that was just a perfect way to like graduate the empire. Like let's stop treating them like just villains that are bad and sit in the shadows. Let's show them be what real villains are in our real world. How real oppressive systems work. You know what I mean? And I'm getting shivers just thinking about how well the deft touch that they had handling this. And just, I agree. The first 3 episodes of season 2 were kind of like, the quality was there. You were just kind of unsure where it was going and it just didn't quite connect. But like the slow burn, basically episode 4 through the end of the Gorman arc, and they take their time. They don't rush it. Like it's just perfect. And it's one of those things where like, this is so good. It elevates it above just being good Star Wars content. Now it's just good media. It's just good, it's like a good book or a good, shows like The Wire where like this is beyond just entertainment. It's critical. It's a critical look at our society, and it's asking really big questions that we need to ask of ourselves, and so just to me Gorman is like I no notes. No notes. I don't know how they could have made it better. It's just a really special story in the way they handle it.
Well, I think like to your point, it shows that people within the empire are just people. And what makes us good or what makes us bad is the choices that we make. And like, Deidre's character, trying to keep Cyril away and him realizing what they were doing and him having bad feelings about that, but he's already made the choices to get him where he is. And then, dude, like his ending where he sees it, he finally gets to confront Andor, and Andor has no freaking clue who he is. It's just like the worst thing that could possibly happen to that character.
It's heartbreaking.
And I loved it. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
and it's so
fantastic.
good because it's like right up to the point he dies, I'm thinking, oh, is he going to become a rebel? Like, is he going to be right? Like
Yeah, there's that
he
turn
seems to be having
starting.
this
Yeah.
moment where he's like, what am what am I a part of right now? What am I doing? And then again, it's like that. This is what the system does. Like, it doesn't even let you reconsider. Sometimes it's just going to use you, and it's going to crush you and be done with you, and it, all of these things. Yeah, and another thing I just wanted to highlight too about the Gorman arc is just the casting. The
Oh,
guy
yeah.
that plays the like crop
Yes.
farmer. He's like the leader of the Gorman in the like. I was just like, who is this guy? I love his face. I love his delivery. He just feels so real and so just like everything. Every way his acting just brought so much weight with it. He always just had this weight with how he delivered things that was just perfect. And then even the bellhop.
The bellhop,
He was
the
the
hotel
bellhop's like my
clerk.
favorite. The
Dude,
bellhop's my favorite.
he's
For
so
one, I want to
good.
say, you look at him, his eyes are huge, and I think that's a big part where he just has these almost like anime like eyes that you just he looks like a deer, almost like the cute version. You know what I mean? Where you're just like, oh, I want to look at his face. But man, like just his like 10 lines of dialogue or whatever he has felt so impactful. He felt so real, and like yeah, it was everything from the cat like. I think that to me is always a communication of how much they're taking a show seriously is how much energy did they put into casting a character with like 2 scenes, right? Like, did they really try to find like someone interesting and someone that could do something? Or is it just like, let's just find someone that fills the role? And like, to me, this show is just like every little piece of that Gorman arc, they put so much thought and energy into, and it just really shows.
Yeah. Well, and kind of that unfortunately brings me away from Andor again, back to the Starfighter thing, which is like I don't really want to see Ryan Gosling in Star Wars. I want to see
Mm,
unknown great actors, become stars, in this world where you can kind of do that. Like
mm.
there's something about like these just real tactile people. I mean, even Diego Luna, like he's a big star, but he fits in the world of Star Wars so well. And same with
Yeah.
Stellan Skarsgård. Like
Yeah,
those two,
yeah,
like they're not like celebrities, like Ryan Gosling status. They're they're somewhere below that. But like it's just like well, yeah. I mean, the casting of every single character, and like you got to give props to George Lucas or whoever the casting director was for finding Mon Mothma back in the
oh
Revenge of the
yeah,
Sith days.
Oh
Like
yeah.
Genevieve O'Reilly is just perfect, and like as good as she was in season one, I thought season two was just
yeah,
like
Oh,
she
way
was
more to chew on too.
star making for her. Like it was
yes,
huge.
Yeah, there's this thing I've said it before in previous podcasts or whatever, but and not to pick on previous Star Wars, but like Mando season 3, when you have an episode with Jack Black, Lizzo, and Christopher Lloyd in it, that's in one
oh my
episode,
god, or
right? Or
Kumail
you have
Nanjiani and
yeah,
Obi-Wan.
he's the other
Oh
egregious
man.
one. It's like you're when you're hiring actors and they're just kind of playing like the version of themselves that they're in every movie. It starts pulling you out of that world. And like we were talking about with the leader of the Gorman Resistance, those guys are just amazing actors, but they look like real people.
Yes.
And I think a
They
big
don't
thing
look
too
like
is
they don't look like models, which I think
no.
yes, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and a big, problem that all actors face is that when they get to a level of success, when they're in a new movie, you're watching that actor and hopefully you'll get lost in their performance, but a lot of times they're carrying all their other movies with them and you're thinking about those movies as you're watching whatever movie you're watching. And so in this case, Andor does a great job. Again, it's because of all the things. It's because of the lighting, the shot composition, the dialogue, and whatever. But all those things are working together to make you forget about what those other actors have done. But more importantly, again, these people feel real. Like the guy who gets killed, who's like, I can't remember his brother-in-law or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
In the first 3 episodes on the farm, like he's also like everyone's a great actor in the show, but that guy too, like he looks like he fits in the world of Star Wars. And when he dies, you feel it. If that was Jack Black, Jack Black's not a bad actor. Like he's done some really great stuff, and I like him in Minecraft. I think he's hilarious in that just because he's getting to be Jack Black. It's fun, but you don't want to break the reality that we're setting up. And I
Yeah.
think what you guys are talking about is spot on. The casting is so important. And yeah, and so I think it's a lesson to be learned. And it's gonna be hard to watch Starfighter and not see Ryan Gosling. Ryan Gosling is probably one of the better versions of this because
Yeah,
typically
for
when
sure.
he is in a movie,
Yeah.
he has been able to embody like Drive, even Blade Runner. Like even though he's been in some bigger movies, Fall Guy, whatever, he's always done a good job of not being like a caricature of a previous performance. So,
Yeah. I
He
think
has
it's
this
but
like,
he,
it's the Ryan Gosling Sean Levy combo that I'm the most worried about rather than
me
just
too,
Ryan Gosling.
me too.
Because it's like, again, I mean, Blade Runner 2049, I think you could put in like the same category as Andor, where it's like I don't even really consider it, like you said, Daniel, like entertainment. There's something like that's very cerebral about it, and
mm,
like that it's more of an experience than it is like a sit down and enjoy some movies or popcorn or whatever. Like it's really experiential. And you're right, like Gosling and Harrison Ford are two huge stars, and that worked in 2049. But again, Denis Villeneuve as the
Top
as the
five, top
yeah,
five, baby,
creative
all
force
time.
behind it, it's like that gives you, I think, a lot more like the director and the creative, the tastemaker behind it is so important,
mm-hmm,
and that's what we got with Gilroy with Andor. And to your point about the cinematography and composition, Donovan, like thinking about that, they've had like famous DPs shoot some of these Star Wars shows, like Greg Fraser shot the first episodes of The Mandalorian, and
Hmm.
I cannot remember his name for the life of me, but the cinematographer behind like Old Boy and Last Night in Soho shot the Obi-Wan Kenobi show. And it's like all the DPs on Andor are just working, UK
mm-hmm,
DPs. And I would put the cinematography of Andor way above the other two that were just mentioned.
yeah,
Like it's putting talented people in the right place. And I think that's how they can control the budgets of these shows a little bit more, is like, yeah, like maybe it is shooting in the UK, and like volume can be done well. And I think seasons
yeah,
1 and 2 of Mandalorian showed us that volume can be done well. But now, like some of the other stuff, like Ahsoka and Mandalorian season 3, it's just like there's just like this overly Disney polish
mm-hmm,
with it now that I don't love. It's kind of that Rings of Power thing too. Like it's like the Lord of the Rings movies felt so tactile and lived
yeah.
in, grounded, and there was grain and there was dirt, and Andor gave us that, but still feeling elevated, still feeling polished.
I think the best example of Andor when this talking about cinematography is the scene where Luthen this is in the final pod. The opening of the final pod is when Luthen is at the bench
Yes.
with the guy who is
Shot choices.
yeah,
Yeah.
been a double
Yeah.
agent, and that whole thing is on a bench. But
Yep.
that is the best example of blocking and
Yeah.
cinematography and dialogue and story and tension all coalescing into a moment where you can see the character's mindset shifting with the
Mm-hmm,
cinematography,
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
and that is filmmaking.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
yeah, so you start wide and you're getting closer and closer, and obviously there's other wide shots involved, but the way they like even some tilts and just the paranoia of like, oh, there's empire around us, maybe who can we trust? Like it is all represented. It's like here's the big thing too is true filmmaking is when you can just turn off the sound and turn
Yeah.
off the dialogue, and you can watch it, just without any sound or noise or Foley, whatever. And you're getting to see the visual storytelling of that. And I bet if you watch that scene with no, with just nothing, you would understand like the tension and the emotions behind that. And that is filmmaking.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're 100% right. Real quick, just because you said it, Greg Fraser, did he do the Batman? Did
Yeah.
he? Okay, okay,
He
yeah.
did Dune and the Batman, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
I think that does illustrate again something that I felt a lot with these Disney shows, you know, probably after Last Jedi is just the too many cooks in the kitchen feeling
Yeah.
of there's too many people that think they know what the show should be. And because of that, we're getting these kind of, when I look at Obi-Wan Kenobi, when I look at The Acolyte, or these shows that had all the pieces to be something special and just weren't. You know what I mean? Those shows feel like,
Yeah.
someone had the idea that Camille Nanjiani should play this random role. Wouldn't that be fun? Wouldn't that be funny? Look at, that would get us this amount of engagement on this website, or, whatever the analytics that went behind those decisions. It needed someone in the creative power to say, no, that
Hmm.
will take us out of this. That does not honor the creative world we're trying to engage the audience with, And I think it is that thing where, again, we're hearing the stories about how many times Tony Gilroy had to be that person in the room, had to be the person that said, no, we're not doing that. If you're going to make us do that, we're just not going to do it. You know what I mean? And like that kind of creative confidence, someone that has a vision and knows how to pull it off. Not only do they have a cool idea, they know what it takes to accomplish it and are laser focused in on that. That's what Andor has the feeling of, that kind of creator-led project. The creatives are the people in charge here, not the bean counters, not the ad execs that want to make sure it's marketable to this many people, the creative people.
Well, there's creator confidence, and the other flip side of this that I feel like we've really lost in the last 15 years is creator intent.
Sure.
I always think about this behind the scenes shot of Thor Ragnarok, and I like Thor Ragnarok. It's a fun movie, whatever. It's got its problems, but it's fun.
Oh,
There's
yeah,
a
for
shot
sure.
where Taika Waititi is like behind. There's a rig, and there's like literally, I'm not joking, 30 cameras on one rig, and they're all pointing at Chris Hemsworth. It looks like a dome. It looks like one of those like visual effects things when they're trying to get a 3D model of you. But this was just on a rig, so they could get 30 different angles of one shot. And it's like, oh, like that right there means that you don't really know what you're wanting before you go into the scene. There's no intent behind your direction. And like, just think about, and granted, Thor Ragnarok gets a pass. It worked, whatever. But there's something special about going into a project, the Brad Bird way, storyboarding everything, going in with like, I want the camera to do this, to tell that. And I think that's the other flip side. You're talking about the confidence and the intent. They have to go together. And yeah, sorry, Daniel.
No, you're absolutely right. I think it. Tony Gilroy not only had a perfect vision of what this needed to be, he had the experience and the know-how to make sure it got that way. And so I mean, he was functioning as much as like a producer, I'm sure, in every role. I mean, he was the showrunner, but like, I mean, I'm sure he was on set every day. You know what I mean? Like, and just had his hands in everything. And I do want to, speaking of all maybe the mismanagement at Disney. Tony has come out and said that Kathleen Kennedy is a big reason he was able to do this, right?
Yep.
And so it makes you wonder, just like, okay, where is the disconnect happening at Disney? Because it can make this happen. Kathleen Kennedy, look, her credits are amazing. She's been a part of some of the most important works in like cinema history in the past 50 years in terms of
You
what
can't write the history of Hollywood without Kathleen Kennedy. You can't.
Yeah. And so like, it can happen. It seems like she was very instrumental in making sure Tony got to do what he wanted to do. You know what I mean? And so it is, it's like, okay, well, why can't we make this happen more often? that is,
Well, first of all, yeah, I mean, like she's awesome. She's one of my favorite producers of all time, and I think that I would not want her job ever because I can't imagine the
no.
pressure. It's insane. But I think like Star Wars has an identity crisis. And I think that, Marvel, I don't have any reverence for Marvel. I didn't grow up on the comics, whatever. I'm just a casual Marvel moviegoer. But Marvel has a brand. Marvel, every single Marvel thing is a Marvel thing, at least, to a point. And it's like they infused the comedy with the, whatever. And I think for a while there, like Star Wars was basically trying to be Marvel. It was trying to be more funny, and like this worked. And I mean, Rise of Skywalker essentially tried to badly rip off Avengers Endgame.
They fly now?
Yeah.
Really, really poorly. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
really
am all the
poorly.
Jedi. Yeah.
So it's like I think that, whoever and like, a lot of fanboys online love Dave Filoni. And like I like Dave Filoni too, but Ahsoka wasn't for me. I thought that, again, it's overly polished, not perfectly written. Like there's
He's a great
lots of
idea
plot
man.
holes.
Is what
Yeah,
he is.
Yeah.
good ideas. Like I got super stoked. We're going to a completely
Yes.
other dimension, galaxy, whatever. And then we got there and it was kind of a letdown. And, I think that, what Kathleen Kennedy needs to be, or whoever takes on that role, like the thing that like George Lucas was the Tony Gilroy of Star Wars, in the creation of the originals and the prequels. Whether or not you like the prequels, it was his vision. But he, in the with the originals, he was hiring other directors, he was hiring other writers. You need somebody that can oversee that and cast those roles. Because with Andor, like Tony Gilroy can't he's not he has no time to do all of it, right? It's the casting behind the scenes. It's hiring Bo Willimon to write three scripts. It's hiring Dan Gilroy, your brother, who wrote Nightcrawler and is an amazing writer, to write three scripts. Like it's the putting people in roles
Mhm.
where they're going to be successful and do great things. And it's just like it's such a mishmash right now. It's like Star Wars doesn't know what it wants to be. And you know, like I enjoyed Skeleton Crew, but it's Goonies in space. It's just a pirate. Like
Yeah.
it's fun, but it's like, okay, how does this tie in? Like we need some
Yeah.
kind of plan. You know, like they needed to have obviously a plan for the sequel trilogy, but we need some kind of trajectory where all the things tie together
Yeah.
in some way. You know, the ancillary media and stuff like that. And it's like pick a lane and just go.
Yeah.
I
I mean, I
agree.
think you're right that like the tone of Star Wars is so inconsistent.
All
Like
over
it's just like at times you're right, it wants to be a comedy, at times it wants to be a family-friendly kid show, at times it wants to be and Andor, a Shakespearean commentary on current politics. You know what I mean? But even then, speaking of Marvel, and listen, I have a laundry list of issues with Marvel, especially recently. But for all their faults, the tone is consistent, when they all team up, when we get to the Avengers movies and it all comes together, even then the tone is consistent, and they found a way to kind of go between comedy and comic relief, but then ultra serious and big character moments, a moment where a character can shine and have a moment. And I think that is a thing of like, what is Star Wars right now? Star Wars, if you asked me that after the prequels or even after the sequels or the original trilogy, you kind of have a clear idea of what Star Wars is. It's this big romantic, kind of hero's journey where, yeah, there's moments of levity, but it's all kind of it's all played for straight in the world that it's in, and it's all got this consistent feeling of when you're there. And even listen, the prequels, I'm not naive to their issues. As a kid that grew up with them, I have a lot of love for them.
sure. Same.
And
Same.
there's a lot of problems with maybe there's a lot of issues in how George executed some of his ideas, but the thing that always draws me back, that always feels consistent, is the tone of what he was doing. Is that he had an idea and he's going for it. Yeah, it didn't quite connect in some areas, but it feels intentional and it feels like it knows what it's trying to do, and it feels consistent. And like that is, I mean, it really feels like Star Wars needs a brand new trilogy that can just reset things, and just let's decide on how we want this universe to feel and what it's going to be, and let's go there and do that. And yeah, I mean, I'm very hopeful that I'm very hopeful, or I'm hopeful, but not maybe confident in the idea that maybe they can learn the right lessons from Andor and learn the right lessons, honestly, from the last 10 years of trying to do Star Wars, and kind of not, they just haven't found momentum. I think that's the main thing. Every time they've started it, it gets stopped very quickly within the next season or two, whether it's Mandalorian or it's the sequel trilogy or whatever. But
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's two things happening. Oh, sorry, Alex.
No, please. Yeah.
So there's two things happening. One is this is kind of separate, but I don't understand why they announced episode. It's not 10 yet, but episode 10 with Ray.
Ray.
Makes me feel like they've learned all the wrong lessons along the way. And the other thing is, and I understand the corporate side of it, where you want to announce things that are in development, so you can keep your stock prices up or have a good quarter or whatever. But just like we saw with DC and Marvel has kind of gotten in a little trouble with this lately, Star Wars is a big one too, where they've announced like, look, we're still the story about Ryan Johnson's trilogy is that maybe one day he'll make it. And that was announced 10 years ago or 8 years ago now. I don't even know
Yeah.
my time. Again, my timeline's wrong, but they need to stop announcing things that are in pre-development. Not even development. They're like in pre-development. They're like, hey, James Mangold, you gonna make a Star Wars movie? And he's like, yeah, sure, let's do Dawn of the Jedi. And I'm like, okay, cool. And they announce it at Star Wars Celebration or some investor call, and that gets them in a lot of trouble, and it makes them even look perception wise that there's no intent in the storyline. Because there's tons of things. Even Marvel has a whole writers like basically a writer boot camp that they're like they have people that just pour through comics to make pitches that we've never heard of, and some of them that have come back, 7, 8 years later, and they finally made a movie about it after however many drafts. And that's a good thing that we have not heard about them because it would feel like there was no plan if we heard about them. And that's so two things there. Again, I don't know why they announced episode 10 with Ray. Again, it's not episode 10 yet, but that and also they've got to really project confidence publicly. So
Yeah, well, and I think like the mandate, I mean, I think actually DC is a perfect example of what Star Wars needs to do. And it's like, and it can be Kathleen Kennedy. She doesn't have to leave.
Hmm.
It can be her saying like, we are not going to do something. We are a script first company. The
Absolutely.
script has to be
100%.
ready. We're not putting anything out there unless it's fucking amazing. And we will like we're not going to announce, we're not going to whatever like that, like what the idea of what Gunn is doing with DC. Obviously, we haven't seen the fruition of it yet, but that mandate I really like,
Yes.
and I think it could be successful for them.
It's the old mandate, right? Like, isn't that the
Yeah.
way it's supposed
Yeah,
to
well,
be? I mean, there used to be movie,
yeah.
obviously studios or production companies would buy ideas, like 20, 30
Yeah.
ideas or whatever, and you would get money to make them, or they would buy blocks of movies and whatever. That's way a long time ago. But it's supposed to be where there's a script and someone says, "Hey, that's a good idea. Let's make that movie."
I
That's
feel
how
like
it's
Marvel's
supposed to
success.
be.
I think Marvel's success with that first like Thanos saga, like they learned the wrong lessons because how many of those movies were they like, we'll shoot the ending when we get there. We don't even know what the ending to this movie is, or like
I say it all
the
the
famous
time.
story
Iron
about
Man 1, Jeff Bridges did not know he was the bad guy in Iron Man 1 until they were like halfway through shooting. And they changed the script. That's a real thing. And that
yeah.
movie worked. We got away with
Yeah,
it.
that's the problem. Is
Yeah.
it worked so well for them? They kind of kept failing upwards with some of these
Yeah.
ideas and these processes. They're like, I guess we don't have to have a script. We can just figure it out on set. Yeah,
I
yeah.
can't imagine. I can't
Um,
imagine.
One more thing, I know we're kind of finishing up our conversation, but one last thing I just wanted to highlight on Andor as we wrap up is another character that just stole the show, which was Clea, which is Luthen's assistant, which, you know,
Season two, especially, like she
yeah, I mean, like I did read that like they gave her more to do after
Yeah.
season one because they saw how good she was. You know, she was kind of a minor character, and they're like, oh crap, the actress is Elizabeth Dulau. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. But anyway, I just wanted to highlight her because I think she just stole the show in those last 3 episodes, especially.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And just was such an interesting character, such a paired so perfectly with Luthen in terms of just their the way their personalities bounced off each other. I loved getting her backstory. But yeah, I just wanted to highlight her because I just thought, I mean, I'm sure we'll see her in more because I don't think she's really been known for much before this. But she was just incredible. Another one where it's like, man, that's what if you get good casting directors and you get the right casting, this is what can happen. You can find diamonds in the rough like this. It happens all the time if you have the right people in place. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight her character. And
It's great that you bring that up because it's again like that was a star-making performance from season two. She will have a career from season two. And it's what they wanted to do with Daisy Ridley and with the cast, the sort of the discovery of the cast from The Force Awakens, but the material just wasn't good enough to launch them the same way that the originals launched Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher was already Carrie Fisher. But, it's like yes, like finding those diamonds in the rough that are just great actors and giving them good writing to go off and like do great things with. It's amazing what can happen.
Isn't it wild it works that way? I will say that Adam Driver, it don't matter.
sure.
I could watch that man watch a paint dry on a wall.
Yeah.
That he is probably my top 2 or 3 favorite actors working today.
Yeah.
And it's a gem that we got him in the sequel trilogy, and he's my favorite character probably in the sequel trilogy.
he's
Just to
also the
watch
one
him
that
act.
looks the least like a movie star. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like he
you're
just
right.
has so normal features.
Yeah.
Like Oscar Isaac before Force Awakens was kind of an indie
Oh,
guy as
well,
well.
he's phenomenal too.
And I would watch him watch
Yes.
paint. Like
Yeah.
it's just like there's certain people that work in the world. And yeah, it's just finding those great actors. And I think like, one thing that Andor did really well too, that the original trilogy did, is that, finding those British actors for
Hmm.
the Empire. Like it's like,
They're
Yeah.
just better, man.
It
British
just works
actors are
better.
just better.
they're just better at being evil. Like just
They're better at everything, really. It's crazy how good the
Yes.
actors they are because they're
yeah,
all being trained classically. It's one, and they're
Yeah.
yeah.
it
Yeah.
makes a big difference. It really does make a big difference. I did want to
Yeah.
ask you guys, how did you guys feel? And you kind of touched upon it, Daniel, about the flashbacks to Luthen in the last pod here. For me, a little bit, it was kind of like, I guess it's the first episode, maybe the second episode too. It was kind of a little jarring a little bit, but I was appreciative just to get more Luthen. So, and kind of seeing that. But how'd you guys feel about it? Was it working for you? Could have been done better? Or?
For me, it started off weird. Like it was like,
Yeah.
okay, this is odd. And then by the time we got to like the exploding of the bridge, on which I assume was
Yeah.
Naboo, um, I was
Oh,
I was
I
totally
didn't
in
even
it.
think about that. I
I
guess.
think it
Wow.
was Naboo. I'm not
Oh,
100%
was
sure,
it?
but
Okay.
they did some shooting in Italy, and so I'm assuming that was
Sure.
supposed to be at least a planet similar to Naboo, if not Naboo. But um, yeah, I ended up liking it because I liked seeing their relationship. Like I
Yeah.
think we almost needed that for the last pod to work and for the
Yeah.
payoff of
Yes.
her, taking his life. Like we needed that backstory. It just maybe felt a little kind of stuffed in there at first, and then it started working for me. But it almost made me wonder if like could you have started the season with those
Mm.
flashbacks
Yeah,
and
me
Mm.
too.
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I agree. I think the issue was it comes right after the end of the Gorman arc. And
yeah,
that is just such an emotional peak that it's like the next episode being flashbacks just feels a little bit pacing like, okay, this is very different pacing than we were just
yeah,
at. You know what I mean? And I think, if you could give one critique of the show is like, yeah, maybe there is a more Nolan-esque, we talk about how Nolan does flashbacks a lot because he does them really seamlessly a lot where it doesn't, so many times when a show does a flashback, I'm like rolling my eyes. I'm like, great. Now the
It's like a
stakes
whole
are even
episode.
lower for half this episode. Like, I
Yeah.
already, like, it's just
Yeah.
kind of like I'm less invested in this story because it's a backstory. It's a flashback. Nolan always does them in a way that never feels like I'm slowing down the momentum to do a flashback. And so maybe there is a way that it kind of intercuts it more, but I mean, I agree that we needed those episodes for that emotional payoff of the second to last and the last episode for their relationship. I really did just I loved getting more of just why Luthen is the way he is, right? Like seeing he's coming from just this like war background. He was just a soldier that just kind of war and death just overwhelmed him. And, I really loved getting just more. Honestly, I would, if they want to do a spinoff and just do a young Luthen show or a Luthen show, I'd take it. You know what I mean? Like, he's that cool of a character. He's that interesting. He embodies, again, so much what feels realistic. He's a good guy doing bad things for a good reason. You know what I mean? I think that's just so interesting. Anyway, yeah, I agree. It started weird, but I think once we kind of got settled into what the pacing was, and once we kind of reconnected even further to Luthen and Clea, it finds its kind of own momentum and finishes out the series really strong.
one character we haven't talked about at all is Bix, and I think
Mm.
we're talking about how that like the ending of her holding the baby, looking up
Oh
to the
man,
sky, makes
yeah,
the ending of Rogue One just that much more potent for me.
yeah,
Yeah.
Like I
yeah.
was like, how are they going to make because obviously like you're so invested in the Bix and Andor love story that
Mhm.
like you're like, how are you going to make the thing that comes in Rogue One work? And I thought that they really did, and made
Yeah.
it that much more tragic, but also like you
Yes.
feel his sacrifice that much more.
Yeah, I mean
100%.
the episode that ends with kind of her doing the voiceover of her letter about
Yeah.
how it's like maybe after all of this, maybe when this is all over, we'll be able to find what we want again. And even just like her decision, the way they tied in her decision with that lady with that was force sensitive, and the way
Yes.
it was kind of this like she sensed that Andor was a part of something bigger and that she was getting in the way of what the galaxy needed in a
Yeah.
way. I just thought it was just such a powerful moment for her character to make that decision, to leave him and be like, you need to focus on this. The galaxy needs you to focus on this, and that kind of be underpinned by this character that kind of gives this mysterious prophecy about him. Like like you mentioned earlier in the episode, like just the way they just used the Force to give it just a little bit of flavor. It wasn't. It's not like the Force made this happen, or like it gave the characters a little bit of mystery, of like kind of wondering what's going on around me, and just the way it pushed Bix to make a very self-sacrificing decision. And I agree, just a decision that makes the ending of Andor even more complex emotionally, and in a way that's like, it gives you like, he has a legacy, right? Like it gives a little bit more sweet to the bittersweet ending of Rogue One, knowing that his legacy lives on. But I just they handled that whole thing really, really well.
That baby grows up to be a soldier in the First Order. Do you know that, Daniel? Is that what?
He grows up to be the red-haired dude that sucks. And
there is a nice little echo here of, Luthen says, I fight for a sunrise I'll never see. Yeah. And that's what's happening at the end. We do know, I'm assuming like they're looking at sunrise right when Andor's dying, right? That's what my assumption is. Same thing. Andor's not seeing, he sees a different sunrise, but he's not seeing the sunrise, but his son will be. And I think that's obviously very poetic and fantastic. We are going to wrap this up with final thoughts, but I just want to add one more thing. Mon Mothma being snuck out of the Senate by Andor in the I think it's penultimate episode. That was phenomenal and so good. Again, you guys said her name earlier, the actress from Mon Mothma. She is fantastic, and just seeing, even though that version of Andor we saw in the opening of Rogue One, which made him such a compelling character, was when he's shooting a guy who's broke his leg or whatever. Yeah. And it's like, oh man, this is like a different gray to the rebellion we've ever seen before. And kind of seeing again him just kind of going through people because we have a mission. This is for the betterment of the rebellion. Seeing all that in that penultimate episode for me was fantastic, and I had to say that before we wrap things up. But
it reminds me. There's this YouTuber that I watch that does like these movie reviews, and his tagline is like "super easy, barely an inconvenience." Do you?
Yeah, you talking about the it's the guy on Screen Rant who does like yeah.
So it's like Andor to me, like that episode, and like the constant roadblocks that get in the characters' ways that they have to overcome, and they have to be smart, and they have to think. It's like there's no super easy, barely an inconvenience in Andor. Like it's some of the stuff that happens in like the other Star Wars and Marvel movies where it's like, that's not a problem. We'll just do this and we're over it. It's like that's to me like one of the things of good writing is like the obstacles are constant and the characters are always having to think on their feet, and like and that episode in particular made me think of that because it's like just constant, like that you feel the stakes. Mon Mothma gets out of there. You've seen the original Star Wars movie, and yet you're on the edge of your seat. Like that's pretty amazing. That's a feat.
Yeah, it's like, it goes back to when we studied screenwriting of like beat analysis and how every scene can be broken down into just conflicts. You know what I mean? It's all about a goal, a conflict, an action, a reaction. That's every, what good writing, it does that in every scene, even if you don't realize it's doing that, right? Yeah. And I think that is absolutely evident in Andor, of just that kind of, yes, nothing is easy. Everything is going to be a challenge. And I loved the escape sequence, and then I really loved, I don't know if it was this later that episode or the next episode where Andor is meeting with all the rebel leaders, and they're all like, who is this guy? And he's like, well, I'm the guy that snuck her out yesterday. And they're like, oh, okay. Like,
because they end up giving credit, right? Like they bring her in on a different ship. Because they make it a political moment as if the rebels snuck. It was this rebel victory versus a moment with Andor. A Luthen victory. Really.
Yes. Yeah. And I do love just how there was conflict even within the rebel leadership with what Andor kept doing and what Luthen were doing, and I just think that meshes so well with the original trilogy, because you do see these rebels as kind of just knights, the heroes, the paladins, we just think it should be the right way, so we're gonna do it, just kind of prototypical good guys. And I loved the way that like we're inserting, oh no, there was like real espionage stuff that went down, people were murdered, all these things, and that clashed with who the rebels saw themselves as. in
Right.
ways. I just think I just loved the dynamic there. And again, just speaking of like, it just added conflict even within scenes you maybe not have expected it, or you know what I mean? Like it just is like, okay, not only is Andor having to escape the bad guys, he's having to like give excuses to these people that don't really get it about how wars are
Yeah.
won.
Well, and again, like just tying into real society, it's
Yes.
the ultimately the politically influential and wealthy people who, that we saw as the rebel leaders in the original trilogy, like the Mon
Yes.
Mothmas and the Bail Organas, and
Yep.
like, and then to see really the story that took place underneath that was fascinating.
Yeah.
For
Absolutely.
sure. 100%. Well, boys, we could talk all day long about Andor and other Star Wars projects, but I do want to go around the room one more time, get final thoughts on Andor Season 2, and we can even throw in again, just to remind our audience, what are we most excited about Star Wars next? Um, Alex, let's start with you.
Hated Andor season two, as you can tell. That was
It's
just bad,
awful.
just bad. Don't ever want to watch it again. No, I mean, I think I'm with Daniel. Like peak Star Wars for me. I would venture to say like at the very least the best thing that we've gotten since 1980 when Empire Strikes Back came out. Uh, and like it's absolutely just a masterclass in storytelling, in execution, in casting, like we talked about. I design everything worked. I thought it jived and really felt like it had a creative, singular voice behind it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Daniel?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but yeah, this is the best Star Wars has ever been, and I'm a little afraid it's the best it'll ever be, but I can still enjoy it, what we got, because I think to me, this is the show that you say it doesn't matter if you don't like Star Wars, you should watch this, right? And like this is just good storytelling. As a human being, you will like this. That's the bare minimum. If you're a human, I think you'll dig it. And so, I mean, that's the highest compliment I can give to really any of these like nerd world like kind of things that I'm a fan of is like you know if it's so good that even if you dislike the IP, you'll find something good. Man, that's the best compliment I could give it, I think. So, yeah, Andor season 1, season 2, to me it's just required viewing if you like good storytelling.
Yeah, I can't really add much there. I mean, again, I agree with both of you on both your sentiments on season two. I will say, I think my dream scenario is we have the writing and team of Andor, Tony Gilroy involved, the ideas of Dave Filoni, and then like a director like Denis Villeneuve, something like that. That'd be like the
Mm,
ultimate blockbuster Star Wars movie I could think of, something like that. I'd even take a version where like Jon Favreau or someone like that who gets like blockbuster storytelling in terms of like compositions, those kind of things as a director as well. But I think having a super team like that, I think that'd be the best thing. But yeah, Andor season two, can't give enough praise for it. And I'm super excited we got to talk about it. Before we go, we do like to highlight one last thing for our audience that may or may not be film or TV related. Daniel.
yeah, so I'm going to highlight actually another Star Wars thing that I've been enjoying lately. Off the Andor kick, I wanted to go be in that world a little more. So I dug back out the game from either last year or 2 years ago, which is Star Wars Outlaws. I don't
Mhm.
know if you guys ever checked that out. It's an Ubisoft game. It's not perfect, but I will say what it does really well is like the Star Wars vibe and ambiance. Like just walking into a cantina in that game feels like being in a cantina in like the original trilogy in a really fun way. And so if you're just wanting to kind of just go dip your toe back into just feeling like go back into the universe, hear some music that sounds like John Williams, using actual John Williams at times, being in, beautiful kind of alien planets and just feeling the ambiance and the vibe of Star Wars. I highly recommend that as one to check out. And it's probably on sale these days after being out for a while. So Star Wars Outlaws, not a perfect game, but a good Star Wars game.
Alex.
Uh, I'm gonna take a moment to be selfish and promote the movie that I
Please.
have coming out. July 1st, a horror film that I produced called The Twin is coming out from Vertical Entertainment. It'll be in, I think, 5 theaters across the country, and then it'll be on VOD the same day. So iTunes, Amazon,
Awesome.
wherever you buy and rent movies, The Twin will be there. It's a super low budget indie film that we made here in Shreveport, and I'm really proud of it.
Do you want to
That
give us a 10-second, like give us the elevator pitch. Why should people go watch it?
It's basically a guy who loses his son, and in the act of, trying to hang himself from guilt, unleashes a demon in Irish folklore called the Fetch, which is a doppelganger of yourself that tries to kill you. So
Awesome.
that's the film was originally called The Fetch. Distributor mandates made us change it to The Twin. But yeah, it's a really fun, creepy, psychological drama, really more than anything, and
Awesome.
really proud of it. Yeah.
Sounds great.
Very, very
Check
cool.
it out.
Definitely going to check it out. I think my one last thing before we go will be I just had this big Predator rewatch over the weekend. Predator Killer of Killers come out on Hulu, I think on last Friday, and I wasn't really super excited about it. It was directed and kind of co-directed by the guy who did Prey, which was very good for Predator fans. But I checked it out over the weekend and I loved it. It's not like peak, everything, but the action's phenomenal. I end up loving the animation style, and I felt like I was really invested in these character stories all the way to the end. And I was like, man, I actually want more of this Predator in this kind of medium. And I'm not excited for Predator Badlands just based on the trailer, but they kind of made me a little bit more excited. 'Cause I'm like, well, so far he's kind of two for two. He hasn't really missed yet, so I'm pretty excited for that. And again, it made me rewatch all the Predator films this weekend, so I had a good time reliving my love of Predator, which is very high. Um, awesome, Alex. Thank you again for being on here, man. Tell our audience all the cool things you do and how they can reach you.
I'm a filmmaker first and foremost, whether that's directing or writing or producing or whatever. I've got different projects in different stages. I'm on Instagram, just at Alexander Jeffery. My last name is spelled Jeffery. It's a little different. And I'm on Facebook and I'm on Threads, and I've got a website, bespokeworksllc.com.
Awesome.
Awesome. We'll put it all in the description below. As mentioned before, make sure to like and subscribe, especially from the YouTube channel, youtube.com/@realtherapypod. And of course, if you can, if you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, leave us a review. It really helps out the channel a lot. We'd really appreciate it. Last thing we do here, Alex, we kind of do a little sign off. We'll go around the room and then we'll end it all for all of us. Thank you again for being on here, man. I really appreciated it.
Yeah.
And we got to have you on here again for either more Star Wars or just something else. We break down movie scripts. We do all kinds of things that are always film related, and we have a really great time doing it. And I'm always learning, so it's always a great time.
Awesome.
My name is Donavon Thompson,
I'm Daniel Wingfield.
And I'm Alexander Jeffery.
and we'll see you at your next session.
Real Therapy is brought to you by 241 Studios and viewers like you. Thanks for stopping by. Remember to tune in every Friday at 3 p.m. for a new session with Daniel and Donavon. And remember, they're gonna talk about how it makes them feel. They're gonna watch all the movie reels, 'cause it's Dan and Don.